welcome to this webinar. This is our second members webinar. We did one a couple of weeks ago. I hope everybody's well and coping with these weird times at the moment. We just found out last week we've got 3 more weeks. So I think things like this are becoming increasingly important, and it's great. It's a great privilege to be able to help people connect with each other in these weird times. I'm really grateful to see so many lovely faces here. I'm going to occasionally I'll pop over and add some people coming in. So what we're going to do today, right, last time we just had a few people talk about what they were doing, but a few of you said that you were particularly interested in audio. So I thought this time we would focus on one subject, and we've got 3 speakers here today, and I'll introduce them in a moment. And we're going to talk about audio, but we're also going to run a reciprocity circle. So if you look in the chat here, I'm going to do it again so you can see it again. This is a document. This has got the speaker's contact details on it, but also any offers of things that anyone that wants help with anything, or if you've got offers of anything that you want to help others on, just you can add those things into that document, and you can, if you feel like, like now when I'm a bit boring, or any point, you can go into that. But I'll send that afterwards today. So what we're going to do, we'll have a recording of this webinar, and we'll also have a transcript of the chat. So the main thing for those that are new members of Bite the Book, and we've got a few new members here now. I think Alexander, I mentioned you, welcome, and Andy Sharman, I don't know whether Andy's here yet, Dan Lee, and Mark Griffiths, Penny Speller's a new member, and also Susie Delve. So welcome to all of you, and I hope you enjoy today and you find it useful. So the Bite the Book, we set it up particularly to help people get published however they want to publish, whether they want to publish with an agent and publisher, or whether they want to publish independently. We want to educate you on the latest developments in the industry, and also connect you with each other and other people that can use their content. We're also, as well as our reciprocity document that we're working on behind the scenes here, we're going to run a newsletter. We run a newsletter every month. And so if any of you have got any news that you want to share, please do send that through to info@Bite the Book, and we'll mention you in our newsletter. We've got lots of events coming up online, virtually. So on the 22nd next week, we're going to run a virtual agents table. So we've already had the transcripts, the manuscripts submitted from the authors, and we've sent them out to the agents, and they're setting up meetings with the authors. If that goes well, we'll try and repeat it, because lots of you want to meet agents. On the 29th of April, Zoe is here, or signed up before. Hello Zoe, wherever you are. You haven't got your camera on yet, I couldn't see you. We're doing an event on remote access, so how to keep your business running at the moment. And then on the 6th of May, I think Kat has just come in, and she is running a webinar called Get Out of Your Way, and this is just for members. And it's, hello Kat down there, your blue jumper on. You're muted at the moment, Kat. But so we're going to do Getting Out of Your Way, and that's going to be lots of exercises for people to help them with their writing. So even if you're not a writer, it might be just quite a nice thing to do. Kat is an author, but she's also an artist, so there'll be some arty elements to it as well. She's a very good artist. She's a very good writer as well, but she's an amazing artist. So that's on the 6th of May, and then on the 13th of May, Ingram are sponsoring an event on independent publishing called Book Smart. So please do sign up for that. Now, before we start, I'd like you all, before I introduce the speakers, could I check that everybody's chat's working? So could you all say hello in the chat? Do you know how to find the chat? Hello, Amy. That's great. and Judith. So we're going to have a transcript of this in it. So if anybody wants to put their contact details in here and say what they do, then that's quite useful for everyone. Dan Lee's just joined. Dan Lee's another voiceover artist, so it's nice to have another voiceover person. Hello, Susie Delves. Okay, so we've got 3 speakers today, and the first of those, and they've been waiting patiently. Thank you, guys. The 3 speakers we have Carla Herbertson, and she's from Zebralution, and they are a distribution platform for audiobooks. And then we have Ana Clements in her studio, so properly authentic, and she's a narrator, an audiobook narrator. And then James Faktor, who is publishing director at Loom Books, but he also runs something called USound, which is an audio production organisation, a business. So they started with work with Loom Books, but now they work with lots of independent publishers. And I don't know whether you work with authors as well, maybe.
Authors and publishers, yeah.
Publishers. Brilliant. Okay. So my first question is, so hello to all of you. Just hello.
Hi everyone.
My first question is to Carla. So can you tell us a little bit about Zebralution?
Yeah. Hello everyone. Nice to see your faces. It's quite nice to do this kind of a bit more smaller, intimate session. So yes. So I work for Zebralution. We're a digital distributor that offers publishers a chance to gain additional revenue by placing audiobooks at the heart of music streaming services. We deliver our clients' audiobook catalogue to all relevant streaming and download services and book-centric services like Audible, BookBeat, Storytel, Overdrive. But what we specialize in is also bringing your content to services like Deezer, Napster, YouTube Music, Apple Music, and Spotify. We operate all over the world, but we're a German company. I'm based here in the UK, and we started this kind of new audiobook market, or developed this new audiobook market in streaming services in Germany in 2010, and we now stream 10 million tracks a day, audiobook only.
Brilliant. And I mean, there's lots of the European countries, the other countries are a bit more evolved than we are with our audiobooks and getting on these platforms. But can you tell us a little bit about Spooks as well, please?
So yeah, so what we do is, so we distribute to all, okay, we have a shop list, we distribute to lots and lots of different platforms. But when it comes to the additional revenue, what we say is that we distribute to Spotify and all the music streaming services to connect with people who don't necessarily have an Audible subscription or engage with audiobooks at all. It's been proven that they're younger, so we're part of in their ecosystem of Spotify, for example, which now also hosts podcasts. And what we do is, when we deliver to these streaming services, because of our music distribution background, because we represent a lot of labels for Björk, Noel Gallagher, etc., we have managed to, with these streaming services, create content delivery and kind of curation within the services. So we have Spotify profiles and playlists, etc. But we've also developed an app called Spooks, which discovers audiobooks in streaming services like Spotify. It's a free app. Download it, have a look at it. If you've got Spotify Premium, it kind of serves as a library. So you can kind of see what's available and what's not available, because obviously the discoverability in these services is a bit more tricky. But being in these services, because you have reached to 250 million paying streaming subscribers worldwide, is really essential as an additional kind of digital income to your normal audiobook distribution income.
Brilliant. It's such an exciting thing to hear that I have a Spotify Premium account, and it means that I can access audiobooks. I didn't even know about that at all. So and I you know, I mean, one feels often that we are really restrained, and that the only place we can possibly get books is on Audible. And there are lots of different ways
there's lots of different ways to increase your reach and to make additional income. You know, obviously also be in Audible. We want people to be in Audible, but to be able to actually you know, be as many shops as possible. If I had a print book, I wouldn't just want my print book to be in Waterstones. I would want my print book to be in as many shops as possible, even in the Urban Outfitters lifestyle section, if it suits it there, because there's another audience to be engaging with. So, and that's how I kind of see it.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. And it's a lovely app as well, the Spooks app. It's very usable. And okay, Anna, maybe I'll come to you now. Oh, sorry, no, I was going to go to James yet. It was just you were along the screen at the same time. James, can you tell us a bit about USound and how you started up?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. I'm also publishing director of Loom Books. So we are a digital publisher primarily. And I guess my interest in audio really came out of that role. So as a kind of smaller indie publisher, I just really wanted to know if audio was something that we could even do, because the market was obviously getting bigger and we weren't too sure if the pricing would work for us at all. So I really just looked into it for quite a long time, went on to ACX, which was the first point of call. I think most people get onto that, and just found it a bit sort of unwieldy and a bit sprawling. And I just thought I could make this simpler, and started looking at other platforms where actors are and where they're offering their services. And I got in touch with them and started speaking about their process. And as Loom Books, we decided to publish 5 books with narrators who had their own home studio, like Anna does. They could do the post-production and editing as well. So they could take on the whole recording job, and we could just get a really good quality audiobook as well, and not have to use big studio time and the money. So USound really just came out of that, and then just wanted to replicate the process that Loom went through and try and offer that to other publishers, other authors who might be interested in just sort of dipping their toe into the audiobook market, but they might not know where to start, or they might not be sure if it's for them. So I just wanted to really bridge that gap between the acting and the narrating world and the publishing world and books, and just make it easier for the two to come together. So so launched USound about a year ago. I've just been building it up, getting narrators onto the site, and getting the website done, reaching out to people. So that's really the background. We've also been offering workshops to actors as well. So I had a few friends who were really intrigued by the idea. They wanted to get involved in audio, and they're really talented actors, and they're at great acting schools around London, and they weren't really getting the right opportunity to get into audiobook recording. So there was something that I thought we could do, and basically spoke to some of the narrators who had already done audiobooks, got them to do some workshops for these new actors and just teach them everything, the arts about post-production and editing and microphone work and how to set up your own studio. So we've done a few of those as well. The first 2 were in my living room, so they were a bit sort of, let's see how it goes. But we're planning on doing some more in the future. So that's the other side of it. It's bringing new actors into the audiobook world.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I mean, I love the idea that you were just trying to do it yourself, and then you saw that there were lots of smaller publishers that could start as well, that could also get involved in this, and so, you know, nice and entrepreneurial.
Yeah. And authors as well. You know, there's lots of self-published authors now who are building up their brand, and it's for them to think about audio as well if they want to.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm going to come to Anna now and ask her a bit, and then I've got a question that someone's just sent me, so I might ask that next. But Anna, can you tell us a bit about the process of, how did you get involved with audiobooks and what you do?
Yeah, not unlike a lot of narrators I know, acting isn't my first background. I wanted to be a singer as a teenager, but came from a family where that wasn't a real job. So I went to university, studied economics, I'm Spanish by birth, and so I worked at the Spanish Embassy in London. I lived in Milan for a while. I basically stayed in financial administration and worked in finance in different companies throughout the years. My kids became teenagers, and I remembered that I had wanted to be a singer. So I started taking singing lessons again, did 5 years of classical training, got interested in, did lots of sort of charity concerts, musical theatre, but I live in North Devon, which doesn't have much of an outlet for artistic endeavour. So I bought a microphone and started messing around at home. And my first 2 years were really training. It was about learning sound engineering, vocal production, critical listening, finding out how it all works and why. And I got into the business as a VO, so through corporate narration, e-learning work, a couple of commercials, but actually long form narration, which is what we call it, just held my interest. And once I discovered audiobook, narration was a thing, I was hooked. And 3 years ago, I went full time, and I now make my living as a full-time narrator.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And you also took a book that was in the public realm. And
yes, that's right. So Henry James's The Turn of the Screw is a public realm book. Sorry, I was talking to you the other day, wasn't I, about the fact that I work with major publishers and independent authors and small publishers, but also discovered that I could produce a book by myself, as it were, because there is a lot of work out there in the public realm that's sitting, waiting to be adapted and adopted. So I did, and so I have a version that came out in January that's doing well. Yes, Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, which was really interesting and sort of got me into a very different genre that I hadn't yet sort of investigated. So it was nice.
So great. And I'm going to ask you about how you come into all these different genres a bit later. But I've got one question from Andy, who wanted to know. He wanted to understand the whole model of the market and how do production companies relate to publishers and platforms. He said it seems very different from publishing. Does anyone want to answer that question? Or
how do you mean, as in when a book is licensed?
Yeah. So how does a book get made? I'm going to find Andy. I don't usually do this. Bit controversial to ask one of the questions from an audience so quickly.
The audio rights and the book rights are depending on who you're with, are separate, or they ought to be separate, and you need to hold on to them if you can. That's probably my only piece of advice.
So
just from, again, being quite, as a publisher, we were quite new at getting to grips with audio and the rights situation. It is confusing because we were, getting approached by, audio publishers that are there to publish audiobooks, and only those. So some of the bigger ones, like WF Howe's, people may have heard of them, or Tantor Books. So they are actively looking to sign up audio rights from authors and publishers, and then taking that off their plate and doing the recording. They will, they'll often offer an advance perhaps, and then they'll give you a royalty after they've recorded, and they'll just do the publication for you. So for a long time, we were quite happy with that because we didn't really know too much about the value of the audio book rights that our authors had. So if you're an author and you've written a book, you've got those rights straight away. So we were happy to go along with it until we sort of started to look into what the true value could be for audiobook rights in publishing. And sort of now we publish the audiobooks with our ebooks and our print books as well. So we're getting into that kind of side of things, but it is separate. And the author, I think, can also do that themselves, if they're self-published and they've done their ebook or print or whatever, and they're looking to do audio, they can retain those rights and keep 100% of the royalty if they went to do it themselves. So there's loads of options available for people out there, but it is a confusing place, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's confusing, but it's not that different from maybe something like ebooks. Like, you have the rights to the book, and then you go to a place to get it converted into an ebook, and then that gets distributed, and the publisher owns the rights to distribute it, or the author owns the rights to distribute it. So maybe it goes along those lines. I wanted to ask Anna about the process of making an audiobook. maybe we start at that, at the kind of the basic, how you go about producing one, making one.
So under the assumption that I've auditioned and been offered the book, I read it. That's the very first step. I prep the book, so I read it from cover to cover. If I'm given the chance, I'll meet up with the author to discuss where the book came from, how they feel about it, because there's always an awful lot more behind the book than people realize sometimes. If I get it from a publisher, often that won't be an option, so I just have the book to go from. If it's a fiction book, I'm breaking down characters, I'm looking at what the characters say about themselves, what they say about other people, what they say about each other, how they interact, the arc of their story. Sometimes it's a very short story of within, you know, a couple of months of somebody's life. Sometimes it'll start, you know, from birth to death. And so the changes that the character will go through all have to be interpreted and come out in the work. So it's all about the point of view the book's been written from, and I'm making notes all the time about all those sorts of things, any accents they might have, places they've been, you know, effects on their character and their personality that will affect how they speak, the way they carry themselves. All of that comes into my interpretation of the work. Basically, after that, which I feel is the bigger part of the job, that sort of absorbing all that information and taking in all the entire story. I literally sit down and start recording. The narration itself isn't the biggest part of the job. Strange as that may sound, it's probably the most important part, hopefully. But after I've narrated the book, it goes to an editor. It then goes out to a proofer who sits with the book and the audio to ensure that I've said what's on the page. Any corrections or any strange noises that need taking out come back on a correction sheet. It then goes back to the editor to be mastered, and then goes out for production. So there are several stages, and I'm aware that people aren't necessarily. When I got into it, I thought, well, you sit down with a book and you read. How hard can it be? But it probably takes 4 or 5 hours per finished hour of book in work to produce that finished hour.
And is there training that you have to do as a voice, as a narrator?
To be honest, I mean, I've been in this now for 5 or 6 years, and I do nothing but train. It's an ongoing process, but I'm also aware that narrators tend to bring their life story with them. So the reason I'm good at narrating the books I narrate well is because I tend to, in some way, engage with the main character or with the author. There's usually a communication between us where they go, it's you, I want you to read my book. And it's often to do with perhaps what they hear in my voice or the story of, you know, of my life, or something as simple as the fact that I'm relatively well known for Victorian romance because it's where my voice sits, the sound and the feel that I give when I speak. But as an actor, interpretation is what we do. So I do anything from, you know, tension and thrillers to horror to Victorian romance to erotica to non-fiction. You know, it's about being versatile but staying within something that you're able to deliver, which is why it's such a great industry, because it doesn't feel like a competition. When I get a book, it's because it was Ana Clements they wanted. And when I don't get a book and I listen to it afterwards and I find out who they chose, they often sound nothing like me, and their interpretation is nothing like I would have brought to the table. So it's a really personal journey, which is lovely. It's really lovely.
I think that's great. Sounds. I want to listen to some of your books now. I feel bad that I haven't yet. James, I want to, from a kind. So there's a practical thing of making the books. You found a narrator. So either you're a publisher or you're an author. You found a narrator that you want to work with. How much is it going to cost to get this book produced?
So we have 2 set rates. We have a junior artist rate and a senior artist. So the junior artist will be someone who's just starting to learn their trade, learn their craft, figure out their voice and what it's good for and where its strengths lies. So with that narrator, if you were to pick someone on that rate, it would be £120 per 10,000 words. So we go on word count rather than finished hour. And then we have a mixture of more senior narrators who have done 2 or 3 books or more, and they're on £150 per 10,000 word rate.
Okay, great. And you said when we spoke on the phone, you thought it was about £1,000 to £1,200 to get a book, an 80,000 words.
Yeah, sorry, for an 80,000 words, so an average size book, 80,000 words, between about 1,000 to 1,300, that kind of region. Yeah.
And how long does it take as a publisher to get that money back?
As a publisher, so with the 5 books that Loom have done that we've trialed out, it hasn't been too long, but I get in the year that we've had so far, we've made $500 per book that's come in revenue. So I guess if that's kind of an average number, you're looking at, maybe a couple of years or something to make back that kind of investment in audio. But that's a really small sample that I've got to go off at the moment. We're adding more books now because we think the model is going to work for us. So we're desperately trying to publish as many audiobooks as we can, because in the long run, we think it's going to be a good investment. And because the market is getting bigger and bigger each year, and because we're only really using, Audible and ACX is our main go-to, and then we have other platforms that we can put the book up onto. But I mean, with the stuff, Carla's doing and spreading the books to other platforms like Spotify and other sort of musical sort of backgrounds, I think audio consumption is just going to go up and up, because it's, at the moment, it feels like it's quite limited, and the pricing of it is certainly for, an a la carte book, it's a lot for some people, it's £15-20. So different royalty models, I think, will really improve that in the future.
I'm going to come to Carla in a moment, ask her about the different platforms and how you decide where you go. But I actually going to change that one of the questions I wanted to ask you later on, but I feel relevant now, is if you go on Audible, what percentage do they take if you're on there exclusively? And if you're on lots of different platforms, then what's the percentage?
So, sorry, is that for me or for Carla?
For you.
Sure. So directly, if you go exclusive with Audible, you get a 40% royalty back from Audible, and with that 40%, they can keep the rights for 7 years. They control the pricing as well, so you lose the ability to set your own price, and they'll promote it in their own way. So you've lost a bit of control there. And with non-exclusive, you can put it up on the site, you'll get 25% royalty back. But with non-exclusive, you have the freedom to go and put your book on other audio platforms as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so now coming over to Carla. It's a long time since we last spoke. Carla, how do you decide what platforms to put your book on?
Well, it really depends what you want to do and how big your catalogue is, and it's really hard for me to kind of say, oh, this is what you have to do. Like I said earlier, for me, it doesn't make sense just to be in one shop like an Audible, and especially because what I've been finding with a lot of independent publishers coming to me, the smaller publishers coming to me, saying, we've done this 7-year deal in the digital world. To do a 7-year deal with a company is ridiculous. Things are moving so fast, and you're stuck in a contract. You have to be there, but I just to be in one shop for me is very limited. And what the smaller publishers have been saying to me as well, is like James was saying, they're losing control over what they're doing with the book. They say they're going to market it, but they're not. They're looking at their Audible originals, or the book kind of has a peak at the beginning maybe, and then it gets lost within the rest of the offering. Whereas what's been proven when it comes to streaming is that the start is really, really slow, but there's a huge back catalogue share, and slowly the revenues are increasing. So over a year it goes up, and it keeps going up, rather than having a peak and then dropping and then not being able to see again. So there's a variety of ways of doing it. So if you are desperate to be an Audible, and you have a big title that you could do something with Audible with marketing wise, then what you can do is we do windowing, you know, so you window say, oh, okay, this title I want to be in Audible for, you know, we take that 25%, so I'm non-exclusive, but I want to be in Audible for exclusively for 3 months, and then after that I'm going to go to all other shops. I just find, you know, to be able to be in other shops and to have reach to other audiences is incredibly important. And at the moment, we're not seeing any cannibalization when it comes to this, you know, however many shops you're having. So especially when it comes to the music streaming services, which is additional revenue, so that's additional to what the growing download revenues are doing. You know, some of our German publishers, which this is quite fairly new here in the UK and the US, some of our German publishers are now overtaking the additional revenue that's coming in is overtaking their kind of growing download revenue. So I would never be just restricting.
Can you talk a bit about the different platforms and who are on those platforms?
Well, so there's Audible, there's Apple Books, there's Google Books. Then we've got library services like Overdrive, Hoopla. You've got streaming services, very much the Scandinavian streaming services who are wherever Audible is not. I mean, here in the UK, you'd have to say there's quite a monopoly of just being Audible being there. But outside the UK and US, there is Storytel, Swedish, Nextory, there's BookBeat. These are kind of all-you-can-eat streaming subscription services where you pay a monthly, as a consumer, a monthly $12.99, and you can consume as many audiobooks as you like. It's quite hard to consume as many audiobooks as you like because you only have so much time. So just think about that as well. You know, people always think, oh my God, all my audiobooks, listen to them all the time. On a 10-hour audiobook, you don't just listen to 5 10-hour audiobooks a month. So it's kind of, so there's different models. There's download subscription models like Google and Apple Books. There is all-you-can-eat streaming subscription models like Storytel, BookBeat, and Nextory. There's Overdrive and library models. And then there is the music streaming models, which is totally different, and it's full rev share. And I can send you, if you are interested, I don't want to go into the monetary kind of advantages from every one of them. It's quite boring. But if you are interested, I'm very happy to talk to people about, you know.
And you mentioned when we spoke on the phone, you said that YouTube is absolutely massive. It's the third.
Yeah, for me, you were asking about the future, about where we are going. And for me, YouTube has 1 billion logged in users a month. They are an extremely interesting platform when it comes to audiobooks. In 2017, they were the third most listened to platform when it comes to audiobooks. However, there's not one legal audiobook on YouTube, maybe a couple. So it's really interesting for people to see where people are actually wanting audiobooks. I mean, I would never go to YouTube to listen to an audiobook, but there's a younger generation who are craving it. But publishers, and for some good reasons as well, are just not engaging, quite backwards in the kind of sense they're not engaging with new models. So there's a whole new kind of audience out there who are craving audiobooks, but there's illegal content constantly up on. And what we do for our publishers is we have this anti-piracy policy where we have a deal with YouTube. We send them the digital fingerprints of audiobooks, and they have to let us know if there's illegal content of one of our publishers up there, and we take it down. But we've now come to some of our publishers I work with, like Scholastic. I'm saying to them, the Hunger Games is on there. It gets taken down. The next day it's there again. And there are 600,000 people per day listening. So you'd have to think about, you know, this is quite an interesting, why don't we monetize it? You can keep doing the same thing, putting things up and then taking it down. But ultimately, if you think about it, you are missing out a huge chunk of audience, which probably is not going to listen elsewhere. They just keep kind of putting illegal user-generated content on. It's a very interesting platform for me, and I think future-wise, and I don't think the publishing world is, you know, they're struggling to be ready for music streaming, let alone and streaming services. You know, the bigger publishers are not engaging with the streaming services like Storytel and BookBeat. But yeah, so it's one for the future. But for me, it's really interesting. I just think there's a huge potential there for people.
I think that's great. I think I love the idea. I mean, everyone talks about how YouTube's absolutely massive. I use it a lot, and it's how young people find out information, isn't it? And they're all on there, and they're watching television, or what we call television. They're consuming loads and loads of content.
But what I always find really interesting to keep in mind is that you need to nurture your future listener. So, you know, I mean, I used to work for the BBC for many years. The Radio 4 is going through this massive, or trying to go through this massive change of kind of trying to get some new younger people to listen to their programming, because, you know, people will die and will stop listening to Radio 4. So that's kind of same thing. People will find other ways of consuming audiobooks. If you're not there to be offering it, then that is a lost audience and a lost piece of income. And especially the younger audience, we really have to see what they're doing when it comes to media consumption. So I find, for me, that's really interesting. But people are not ready for it yet. That's okay, as long as I'm across it.
Yeah, that's good. Good. Yes, exactly. I like your enthusiasm for it, though. They kind of like, we've got to change the world.
I know. Step by step, though.
All kind of
tiny steps.
One book at a time.
Yeah.
One voice at a time. Amy and Ian are both asking about what's the percentage of revenue with audio. Hang on, they said Audible versus other platforms.
Yeah.
Does anyone, James, can you help with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for us, I think we found it's pretty close, to be honest. We haven't really made a firm decision either way. So we started off, we put a few books exclusive. This was back, when we first started. And, we put some exclusive, a few others non-exclusive, and just compared, and we didn't really see too much difference in them. So I know it's only a small kind of, cross-section of, and we did a mixture of genres as well. So across the board, I think at the moment, for an for a smaller publisher though, we're going to go with just non-exclusive in the future, just because you don't limit yourself, which is, we've been talking about that. I think it's going to be important for the future when the consumption starts to change and streaming starts to get bigger. I think having those rights flexible is going to be really important. But also, if you look at Audible's model and the way that they work with their subscription scheme and their one token, and you get your one audiobook each month, that's great if you're one of the top 5 names in the publishing industry, and your print and ebook is doing fantastically, because you're going to be basically on the top of people's lists. So it works really well for a small minority of authors and publishers, but for the rest, it's not the best method, because you're going to miss out on that one token to a bigger name. So for us, it makes far more sense to spread ourselves across different platforms and just see what comes back and just experiment. And then when we identify the platforms that fit with our kind of book and our genre and our author, we can look into that, and we can try to pour more into that platform. So I think it's been moving in that direction, and I think that's what we're going to do, move forward. Yeah,
and Carla, you said whenever publishers ask you about this, you say try it out. We'll try on other platforms, and they don't usually go back.
No, so what we always say, I can totally understand that people are wary, but what we always say is that you can test it, see how it is, and we started out with small lists from publishers. And then they always come back with more, because they're finding that they are making extra money. And why not make extra money? And I just saw a question regarding, the revenue share for Audible fees as versus other platforms. So if you do a 25% kind of deal with Audible, because the Audible deal won't go through us. We can technically deliver to Audible, but Audible doesn't deal with aggregators on a one-to-one. The contract has to be between the publisher and Audible itself. So we do 75-25% rev share in your favor. So 75% of, and obviously this is across a variety of shops. And again, we've got 35 to 40 shops on our shop list. You don't have to do all the shops. I mean, for me, it makes sense, but you don't have to be in all the shops. You can say, okay, I just want to be in the book-centric shops, streaming shops, like the Scandinavian streaming shops, who are also in India, who are in South America, and streaming is huge in South America. So or and I want to do a library service and then the streaming services, whichever way you kind of want to work. What I would say is with the 25%, the Audible used to have a deal with Apple, which is now no longer valid, where they were the only ones who were able to deliver to iTunes and Apple, which is now Apple Books. So again, we are able to deliver to Apple Books, and we were one of the 6 preferred partners that Apple Books deal with now. So there's I would just take a rich pickings of the shop list and experiment. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But in general, we've never had anyone taken out any content, apart from if they stopped having the rights to actually distribute it, the license it. But other than that, no, it's always been people, publishers adding more stuff because they like what they see.
Brilliant. We've got a question here from Susie. I actually unmuted her.
Thank you.
But once you said here, I'm just going to read what you've said.
Yeah.
I'd like to know about what the audiobook market looks like, the age group, the gender, the number, and what it's going to, how we think it's going to grow over the next couple of years, and if you think COVID has affected the market and the genres that people are taking up at the moment.
Just my thinking behind the COVID thing is that I think there's an age bias. I think you're talking about it, Carla, about audio potentially versus paper, etc., Kindle usage. And I think a lot of people have been forced in our lockdown to look at technology differently and use it differently. Yeah. I'm wondering, like, once they've tried now, do we think that, and also, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but we think, behavior might change a little bit. So do we think this has a potential for this sort of audio market or audible market?
Yes. Audiobook publishing has become the part of the mainstream and being integrated in the big publishers' workflows. It's no longer a niche market. And audiobook listeners, they're across gender, age, races, and the listening options increase. And the average age of an audiobook listener has fallen. And younger listeners are the fastest growing market segment. And audiobooks, I'm just reading this out of my notes, the audiobooks are the fastest growing publishing formats, with 30% growth in 2018, according to Nielsen BookScan. And they've also said that the market is continuing with a volume up to 30% since 2017 and 87% since 2014. So you can see the increase. They account for about 5% of all book purchases and have doubled their share in fiction sales. And 40% of audio sales are through subscription models. And young men tend to be the biggest audio consumers. But if you look at the market, they are getting more press. For example, there's a New York Times monthly audiobook bestseller now, which didn't used to be there before. The market is growing and growing and growing. There's a lot of consumer data on this. So the bookseller do their yearly kind of how many people are purchasing, but because Audible doesn't release their data and book publishers don't necessarily release how much they are earning, it's really hard to put a finger on how big the market is. However, when you're thinking about the quite horrible situation we're in now, and print is declining because shops are closing, digital is rising. And I think although we saw, interestingly, a slight dip in the first week of lockdown, when people had to readjust to their new ways of living, so not commuting anymore, for example. And so we saw a slight dip in the kind of revenue. Within a week, it was back up and it's starting to grow again. So for us, the revenue is going up and up and up. And I don't see how that's going to change, because audio has always been very fast medium. If you're thinking about, James and I were talking about it yesterday, you're thinking about Netflix, they're going to run out of new productions, because they are not allowed to create new productions. But Anna is still recording audiobooks because she's able to do that. We're still able to produce content, and so it's audio is such a fast medium, and able to be flexible and adapt. And people also need a break from screens. So they don't always want to be looking at a screen. I just find, you do a lot on screens now at the moment. We're sitting behind our desks. We are doing all of these kind of Zoom calls all the time. And people want to meet in the evening on Zoom and whatever. I'm just finding it all a bit kind of much.
In your face.
Yeah. And then there's another thing about the whole COVID thing, is that what we were saying yesterday as well, is that it has sadly another impact, not only on health, but obviously also on economical impact, where people are losing their jobs and have less income and we're going to go through a global recession. What would be interesting to see then is, when it comes to audiobooks, okay, so what subscriptions are people going to cancel first? Yeah. And I was saying to James, I would keep my Spotify subscription because it has podcasts and it has audiobooks and it has music. But would you keep other subscriptions? Mm-hmm. There is that. Mm-hmm. So I think, yes, it will keep growing. It will be maybe have a little bit of an unsettled dip again, after we come into the realization of how to deal with the economic crisis that's coming, that we're going to have to go through, sadly. But I think it will always be there, and it will.
I think it's potential, actually, almost.
Yeah, but I don't like to be too. It's not a nice situation to be in.
Well, I wouldn't say potential. Let's say change of marketplace.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a couple of more questions coming up. So I'm going to pass over to those, but please, you've got contact details for all the people on this webinar, so if you want to get in touch with them. But we've got 2 children's authors on here. There's probably a few others that are interested in children's books as well, like Kat, but specifically picture books. So Heather and Kathy were both asking about children's books and whether any of you have got any experience with children's books.
I used to commission children's audio for the BBC, and produce it, and so I love children's picture books. I think revenue-wise, they tend to make less, because, like what James was saying, you've got 1 credit, and is that parent going to give that credit to the child for a 5-minute book? But I think there's what we're finding actually through the coronavirus times as well, is that children's listening is going up, YA is going up, because again, you can't put your child in front of a screen all the time, so there's other ways of and what the interesting thing about streaming is that a child would want, especially picture books, children want to listen to things over and over and over again. It's just not the ones they want to, and so the revenue is kind of recouped in a different way than if with 1 credit, for example, at Audible. So especially with children's books, I think you need to be in as many shops as possible to get that revenue back. And and picture books, as long as obviously they translate into audio, that would be a requirement. Yeah.
James, you sent me some information on a platform the other day. What was the name of that platform?
Yes, I was speaking to someone. They're launching something called Story Schemo. I can send out details if anyone wants to see. But basically, they're starting up an audio platform, and they're looking for they're going to create children's content specifically, because it's, like Carla said, it's such a fast-growing area, and it can definitely adapt to audio. So it's a very exciting part of the industry, and this client is looking for script writers and narrators to get as much new content out there as possible, because at the moment it's definitely a gap in the market, and it's something I think that can be really strong.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that bigger publishers, I spoke to a digital director of one of the big 5. They are doing deals with platforms that want children's content, because they're still finding it quite hard to market to children's content if it's not the big names like your David Walliams. They're getting most of their profits through library. And so they're doing lots of deals with, you know, they have these Tonys thing, you've got a different variety of different things. And now Spotify has come with a children's app as well, which you get as a consumer with your family subscription, and you get curated content through the Spotify children's app for the right age group. And we pitch for the content. So if we have children's books, we can pitch for, to be featured on the Spotify Kids app. So there's lots of opportunity for kids. Yeah.
Great. Does that answer your questions, Kathy and Heather?
Almost, it does. It was very helpful. But I'm interested in how we create it. So if I wanted to narrate my own book and then have some music in it and some little sound effects, who would I go to put that together?
Anna, do you have any idea on that at all? I mean, how would you?
That's not me, obviously, if she wants to narrate her own book. She's
well,
taking
not
my job.
Yeah.
So that would be James, I guess.
James, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, I mean, on top of the standard narration, because of this client I was speaking to, Story Skimmo, the narrators we have, looking at their music capabilities, and there's definitely enough people on the site who can cover that as well. So I mean, it's really how hands-on you want to get with it. I mean, now's not the best time, I guess, because of, you know, the situation we're in, but the other part of USound, which I didn't speak too much about, is that we're really trying to get authors involved in recording their own stuff. And if they feel like it's something that's, you know, beyond them, it's really not. It's about putting them in touch with just the right people. And so the narrators on the site, when they're not doing their own narrations, I'm offering them to authors to get in touch to sort out doing their own work and reading it. So we've had entrepreneurs and non-fiction writers, and it's really important for them that they're speaking their own stuff, if it's self-help or personal memoir. So that's a huge growing part of the industry as well. And it sounds like it's something that you'd be interested in, and seeing what other bits of music and sound effects can get added to the whole package, and that's something that, yeah, it can be sorted out.
How it gets put together does that mean going to a studio? And do you know that? Really going down to basics. So
because of the situation, I mean, the situation is throwing up all of these challenges, and so one of them is that, yes, I mean, originally it would be very much kind of, I just put them in touch, and the author would go around to the narrator's home studio, and then you'd have a cup of tea, you'd have a chat about you know, what's working, what's not, and they would see if your voice is suited to a certain, you know, microphone, all that kind of thing. But I mean, now I don't know which publisher it was, but they've brought out an audiobook, and the author did all of the recording from their own living room, and they sent off the files to be produced and edited. So that is something that absolutely can be done. Personally, I'm still looking into, you know, the capabilities of the narrators that I have on the site, and we're desperately trying to get that up and going, but it's definitely something to aim for. And in future, once we're out of this situation, it can be something that can be such a huge time saver and a cost saver going forwards. So if it works and we like the quality, then we'll definitely implement it for sure.
That's brilliant. Thank you. We've got one last question we've got time for. There's loads of questions coming up in the chat. And people are asking that they want to get in touch with you. So please do look at this document. And the contact details for all the speakers are in that document. Hopefully, Anna, this might be a better question for you. We've not had too many questions, but Michael Miller had a question about whether it's better to have a single voice or multiple voices. So do you want to?
Yes, happy to. Sorry, along with all the other questions, really, it really is specific to your book. So whether you go exclusive with Audible, whether you don't, whether you use one voice, whether you use multiple, whether you have an entire cast, it's specific to the book that you've produced. And every book is individual. There really isn't a catch-all. So whether you go to acx.com and find yourself a narrator, whether you ask James to help you because you need someone to pull it all together for you, whether you go with Carla and have your book distributed throughout Europe as well as America, Canada, and the UK, all of those things are very specific to your book. I've done multicast books. I've done a dual narration where I narrated the female chapters and a gentleman narrated the male chapters. It's really is, but I've also, most of the books I do, I've done 50 books, and most of the books I do, I cover all of the characters. I've also done single characters within books, so I do the female voice only, but the voice is narrated by a man, and whenever she comes in, it's me. So it really is very specific to, a lot of people prefer a bit more audio drama, which is what Kathy was almost describing, the idea of music behind it and making it more entertaining, for want of a better word. A straight audiobook tends not to have sound effects. But again, that's personal choice and specific to the genre and the book you've written.
Does that answer your question, Michael?
I think it does. I think this is an added point in that James and Carla, they'd be able to help with in terms of audience expectations. I totally take that point that, you know, you need to make it, bring your book alive in a way that you feel like it should. But there's also a business case, because it's going to be bleeding expensive to do that. But B, what do the audience expect? What will the audience put up with? I think is probably a better way.
Who is your audience, Michael? Because ultimately, the majority of books that are out there, if you go on Audible or any of the websites, you know, Storytel and all the people that Carla, you know, promotes, I'm actually Spanish by birth, and I also narrate Spanish books under a different name and bilingual books. The expectation in Spain with regards to how much they pay the narrator, how much a book is worth, and what their expectation is completely different. The Latin American market at the moment is exploding. They have music throughout their books. The entire book has a background of sound, which I find hugely disturbing. But that's because I'm accustomed to being told a story like Jackanory. So it depends what you're selling, I think. Sorry, that's just my opinion.
It's good. It's great. And Ian, you got your blog. I'm going to let you just say that you wrote a whole blog about how to get your book done.
Well, basically, I wanted to have some sound effects. I'm a spoken word artist, so I wanted it to be more of a theatrical production. And it seemed to me that an audiobook is something that people will actually pay for, as opposed to just putting it up as a sound production or something on YouTube. And I asked around for a couple of the audiobook studios, and it was just completely priced out. And I ended up going to a music studio here in East London and sat down. I'm very glad to hear Anna say 4 hours or 5 hours for every recorded hour, because I was told, oh yeah, a good audiobook narrator can do 2 hours for every hour, and I was in the studio.
I do 2 to 1. The 4 or 5 was allowing for the audio editor and the mastering and the proofing and the
I mean, the book is only 90 minutes, but I wanted to get it right, and I had a lot of voices, and I had just a few sound effects, and ended up spending about 8 hours in the studio to get it nailed down. I'm really happy with the result. The trouble that I've run into is I did the exclusive thing with Audible, and without really thinking it through, and now I'm kind of in a Audible makes you shill for Audible. They give you 20 promo codes that are really kind of complicated for people. I'm trying to walk my mom through the process, like, okay, you got to go here, now put this, they put it in your cart, and they want you to sell Audible, and then you get one token and use it on my book, and so on and so forth. But the frustrating thing is, like, I have an audience, I know who they are, but how do I reach the people in that audience who actually listen to audiobooks? So
we've gone over the hour now.
Oh, sorry.
Do you mind if we just answer that question? Because I was going to ask about marketing, generally marketing tips.
Yeah, that's my question. I know who my audience is. How do I reach that segment of my audience who listens to audiobooks?
So my tuppence worth, I go to Facebook, has very specific groups depending on the genre that they're listening to, and you can give the codes away to, I belong to, you know, audiobooks for Victorian romance, people who like sci-fi, people who like thrillers, and you go in and you say, and you'll find all the narrators there. I've produced a book and authors. I've produced a book. It's available on Audible. I've got codes. And sorry, something I really want to say is, bad and terrible as Audible is, etc., in inverted commas, they do make use of reviews. So if you give away all those codes and you get people to review your book, when you get to 50 reviews, Audible pays attention and suddenly your book gets promoted. So it's really worthwhile marketing your own book. If you're the kind of person who can push your own work and will continue to do so because you're not already moving on to the next project, that's a really good thing to do.
Okay, great. And just so go into Facebook, and what am I searching
literally
for?
type in audiobooks, you'll get a ton of stuff come up. But if you type in audiobooks romance, free UK audiobook codes, free US codes, because and I don't know who you went through, but ACX will give you more codes if you ask for them.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay, that's
yeah,
good.
yeah. So it's just a case of investigating and exploring. If you know who your audience is, go find them and sell them your book. You know, and if you give it away for free and ask very nicely for an unbiased review, that will also help you to continue to sell your book.
Wonderful, thank you.
James and Carla, do you have any tips for Ian?
I was just going to add a bit more to what Anna said. I mean, that's absolutely right with social media and finding reviewers. I mean, things that work for ebook and print, you know, they can work for audio. It's not that different. It's still getting a story out there. So looking for bloggers in particular, no, that's what we're trying to really look for now. And these audio specific bloggers are starting to really, you know, get bigger and get some attention and traction. So I would, just Google something like that. Just, you know, audiobook blogger. Sorry.
You mentioned Chirp as well to me, and the audio bit of BookBub.
So so for those who don't know, just quickly, so BookBub it's a huge ebook platform. They have millions of followers, and they pick a few books of all kinds of stories, and they put them out, and it gets to a huge readership. And they're just replicating that now with something called Chirp. So that's they're going to take audiobooks and generally discount the price, and then they're trying to reach the same kind of mass following as well. So we're going to look into that and see how it goes, but it's definitely something to look into if you're either self-published author or publisher.
Brilliant. Carla, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, it's a different kind of situation if you're only with Audible, and we would help out when it comes to social media, but we're also representing obviously a lot of publishers. We're able to run campaigns and are in touch with all the platforms to push the content on behalf of our publishers. But that would be if you were to be with us.
Not just for Ian, like let's try and get Ian away from just being on one platform.
But no, what I'm saying, so I just said, you know, in that kind of sense, we would work differently. But I would, so do all of that and then don't go with Audible for 7 years. Definitely go with Audible. But I
mean, I think Ian is he's a poet. A lot of I've read his book, and a lot of it is their tracks. I can imagine people downloading individual tracks from streaming services.
I thought about doing it as Spotify and doing it as an album. And when I looked at the revenue, it just seemed like, what are the chances that I'm going to get 5 million listens to this particular book? And it seemed like Audible or just making an audio book. So of course I had to go through and publish a book on KDP on Amazon so that I was allowed to go and make an audio book. And that seemed to me better than doing a spoken word album. And I'm happy with the result. I mean, technically I'm really happy with it, but again, the marketing is the, the bugbear of any independent author is like, okay, well, how do I get it through this mountain of media?
Good. Well, yes. So, I mean, I'm cutting you short there, but I think, Ian, I've just posted to everybody in the chat again, the Google document, which has got all the speakers' contact details. Has everyone found today useful? Yes, I'm going to unmute you all, I think. I'm going to unmute you all and and I think, go on. Oh, hang on. I've got because I can hear myself. Okay, basically, I want to thank Carla and Anna and James. So can we all give them a round of applause here? And thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it, and that you stay in touch with each other. Document is there to be in touch with them all, with you all. If you've got any information that you want to send through to us to add into our newsletter, then please do.
Please do check out the audiobook. I could always use some new reviews.
And it's lovely. I'm getting lots of messages here saying thank you so much, and we're really pleased they've been involved. This has been great. I didn't know how we were going to manage it, but our speakers have been brilliant today, and loads of questions. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thanks, Justine.